My name is Caleb Madsen, and the day everything changed for me was February 21st, 1972, President's Day. I remember it like it just happened. I decided to go in to help my dad at our family service station instead of staying home. I usually work there on weekends and after school, doing small jobs like pumping gas, wiping windows, stocking soda, and checking oil for customers. That day was freezing cold. One of those mornings where the ice sticks to your boots and the air cuts your skin, and not many people were coming in, so I finished my tasks early and asked my dad if I could head out back for a bit. Behind the gas station, there was a stretch of open land scattered with massive boulders, old limestone giants that looked like they'd been there forever. I climbed those rocks more times than I could count. They were a place I wanted to clear my head to be a kid. But I had no idea that the freezing rain and snow from the days before had worked their way deep into cracks in the stone, weakening the rock from the inside out. I climbed up just like always, no fear, no second thoughts. And then out of nowhere, one of those boulders, shaped kind of like a fat teardrop, broke loose. It came down so fast, I didn't even have time to scream. It hit me hard, crushed me to the ground in one brutal instant. I remember the thud, the weight, and then nothing, except for a strange voice, not out loud, but still somehow real, like it echoed in my mind. It just said, "Oh my God, I'm dead." But there was no panic, no pain in that moment. Just that sentence hanging in the air, like it wasn't even mine. Next thing I knew, I wasn't in my body anymore. I was floating, suspended above the scene, looking down at it like it was someone else's story. I felt totally lost, like my identity had been wiped clean. I couldn't remember who I was or what I was doing there. But the longer I looked around, the more I started to feel something coming back. A flood of awareness, like someone had ripped the dam off my mind. I saw the rock, and instantly I understood things I never could have known. What it was made of, how it had formed, why it broke. And the weirdest part? I wasn't thinking in words at all, just knowing. Then I saw it, the body beneath the rock. At first, it didn't mean anything to me. It was just this crumpled, gray figure, lifeless, the mouth slightly open, blood and dirt smeared across the face. There was something strange about the way it looked, though, something that tugged at me in a way I couldn't explain. I drifted closer, almost studying it. And that's when it hit me like a train. I was looking at my own body. It didn't even look like me at first. I think it was the angle, or maybe it was just the fact that I had never seen myself like that. Not from outside, not without a mirror. But there was no denying it. The shape of the jaw, the mark on the chin, the way the hair curled slightly over the forehead. That was me. That was my face, and I was staring at it from somewhere else. The shock of that realization was overwhelming. It wasn't fear, not really. It was more like the truth settling into your bones, heavy and absolute. I had died, and then like someone flipping a switch, everything about my life came flooding back. My name, my family, the town I lived in, the school I went to, every memory, every feeling, every moment I had ever lived came pouring back into me all at once. I remember my mom's voice, my dad's laugh, the way my little brother used to beg me to let him tag along. It was all there, like it had been hidden behind a wall that suddenly crumbled. And with it came a deeper understanding, not just of my life, but of life itself. I knew I wasn't gone. Not really. My body was crushed, sure, but I was still here, still aware, still alive, in some way I couldn't explain. What really shook me, though, was the next wave of awareness that came over me. It wasn't just memory now, it was knowledge. Deep, unfiltered, raw understanding of things I had never studied, never read, never even thought about. I looked at that massive rock, the same one that had just ended my life, and I somehow knew everything about it. Its weight, its age, its chemical makeup, the exact force it took to break it loose. None of it made sense, but at the same time, it all did. It was like my mind had been plugged into something much greater than itself, something infinite. But even with all that clarity, I still didn't know what was going to happen next. There was this strange, numb kind of peace in the air, but also a flicker of fear. I had been raised around religion, sure. My mom was the one who believed, dragged us to church when she could, but I never bought into any of it. I didn't hate God. I just didn't think he was real. And now, here I was completely outside of my body, floating in a way that no science teacher could explain. And all I could think was, what now? That's when I felt something, not heard, not seen, but deeply, undeniably felt. It started behind me, slow and warm, like standing too close to a fire after being out in the snow. The kind of warmth that seeps into your bones and makes every part of you loosen. I turned around, not with a body, but with whatever part of me was still me. And there he was, a man, standing in this brilliant light, not blinding, but radiant, like it was coming from inside him. He had dark, wavy hair, a short beard, a face that somehow looked familiar, even though I knew I'd never seen it before. And his eyes are the most alive thing I've ever seen. He didn't speak out loud, but I heard him all the same. Not with ears, with my whole being. Every word he shared came as a thought, but deeper than thought. He looked at me, and in that look was a love I cannot describe. Not soft, not fluffy. This was a love that knew me, every failure, every lie, every doubt. And still it was complete. He said, without saying it, this was an accident, but you have a choice. You can go back. I remember thinking, go back. I looked down again at my body, crumpled still, broken beyond belief, and I didn't see how that could be possible. I told him, in that same wordless way we were communicating, that body's destroyed. There's no way it can work again. And he answered just as simply, I can fix it, but the choice is yours. It was overwhelming. I wasn't being forced or guilt or even persuaded. I was simply being shown that I had a choice to return to my body or to stay. I hesitated, not because I didn't love my family, but because I had no idea what I'd be going back to. So I asked, what happens if I go back? What happens if I don't? And without delay, he gave me the answers, not through words, but through something that felt like a download straight into my soul. First, he showed me what would happen if I chose not to return. It hit me like a punch to the gut. I saw my mother, shattered, trying to hold herself together, but barely functioning. I saw my little brother, my best friend in the world, turn angry and cold, getting into trouble, falling in with the wrong people. I saw my dad, the strongest man I knew, lose the light in his eyes and never get it back. But it didn't stop there. I saw years unfold like pages in a book. Birthdays I'd miss, people I'd never meet, moments I'd never share. I saw lives I would have touched that would now go untouched. Faces I didn't recognize, but somehow knew would have been important. And I saw the weight of my absence ripple through time. I wasn't just losing my life. I was losing impact, the good I never knew I was meant to do. That alone nearly broke me. But then he showed me the other side. What would happen if I did go back? And at first, it was beautiful. My brother stayed out of trouble. My mom found her strength and grew even closer to God. My dad, though changed, held on and became more emotionally open than I ever imagined. I even saw glimpses of my future, people I would inspire, lives I would speak into, things I never dreamed I'd be capable of. But then that beauty shifted. I was shown the cost. If I chose to go back, there would be pain. A lot of it. Not just in the moment, but in the years ahead. Pain that would follow me for the rest of my life. Physical, emotional, and spiritual. I would survive, yes, but I would suffer. Still, the more I saw, the more I realized that love wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about what you were willing to endure for someone else. That was the moment I knew I had to go back. Not because it was easier. In fact, it was the harder choice. But when I saw my little brother's face, when I saw the way my mom would cry herself to sleep and how my dad would sit in silence for hours with nothing left to say, I couldn't leave them behind. I couldn't let my absence break them. I looked at the man in white, Jesus, because by now I knew that's exactly who he was. And I just thought, I'll do it. I'll go back. And he smiled, like he'd been waiting for me to say it. The moment I made that choice, everything changed. I felt a snap, a pop, like the sound of a joint being cracked. Only it was inside my soul, not my bones. And then came the rush, like a surge of electricity tearing through me. I was slammed back into my body, and the first thing I felt was pain. Blinding, searing, all-consuming pain. I couldn't breathe. The boulder was still pressing down on me. My chest felt like it was caving in. My right arm was trapped, but with my left hand, I managed to grip the edge of the rock and roll it off of me. I don't know how I did it. It felt weightless in that moment, like it had lost all mass. I sucked in a breath, sharp and ragged, and it felt like a blade driving into my ribs. That pain knocked me out again. When I came to, I was lying at the bottom of a shallow ravine, twisted in a pile of brush and broken limbs. I was paralyzed from the waist down, couldn't feel my legs at all. Every breath was shallow and sliced through my side like someone was stabbing me with each inhale. I was scared, but more than that, I was focused. I had to get help. But how do you climb out of a muddy ravine when your legs don't work? Your spine is likely shattered, and you've just been crushed by half a ton of rock. That's when I saw two boys at the top of the hill. One of them I recognized. His name was Evan Carter, a kid from my school. I called out, weakly, barely above a whisper. But Evan heard me. He dropped down and looked at me with wide eyes. I told him to go get my dad, that I was hurt, really hurt. The other boy, who lived nearby, ran to his house to call for an ambulance. And not long after, my dad came tearing through that field, screaming my name. I'll never forget the look on his face when he saw me. Fear, shock, desperation all rolled into one. My dad was a tough man, the kind who didn't cry, didn't break. But that day I saw tears in his eyes. He knelt beside me, reaching to lift me, and I stopped him. I could barely talk, but I told him not to move me. I said, "My back's broken," and he listened. By the time the ambulance arrived, a small crowd of people had gathered. It was like they appeared out of nowhere. Neighbors, workers from nearby shops, even strangers who just happened to be driving by. They formed a line down the muddy hill, carefully helping pass me up, one pair of hands to the next. I was strapped to a wooden board they slid beneath me, and every slight movement sent waves of agony shooting through my spine. Near the top of the hill, the ground gave way beneath them and the whole line began to slip. I started sliding back, about to fall all the way down again. But then I felt something, a grip like iron. It was my dad. He had grabbed hold of the board and locked his feet deep into the mud. I remember his boots carving ruts into the hillside as he held me steady with everything he had. The other men regained their footing, and together, they pulled me up the last stretch and got me into the back of the ambulance. My mom was already inside, waiting. She had this look of disbelief, of heartbreak, but also a quiet strength, like she'd already started praying the moment she got the call. On the way to the hospital, I whispered to her, "Can you wipe my face?" She blinked, surprised, and asked how I even knew it was dirty. She reached into her purse, pulled out a tissue, and gently wiped away the blood and dirt. I couldn't feel a thing. At the hospital, everything moved fast. They cut off my clothes, ran x-rays, pumped me full of morphine to numb the pain. The scans didn't show much, no internal bleeding, no major organ damage. But I knew something was wrong. I could feel the energy Jesus had filled me was starting to fade like a battery running out. And with it, my grip on life started slipping again. The doctor said my blood pressure was dropping fast. They couldn't figure out why. My surgeon, a man named Dr. Lowell, came into the room and gently told me they'd need to operate. He asked if I understood, and I said, "Yes, but only if you promise I'll wake up." He paused, then he gave me his word. And in my family, a promise means everything. I was wheeled into surgery, and everything around me turned bright and sterile. I was freezing. They placed me on these two metal rails with my spine resting between them. Someone placed a cover in front of my face, and then I heard them say it, "We're losing him." My heart had stopped. I watched, not from my body, but from somewhere just above, as Dr. Lowell took a saw and opened my chest. I still bear the scar across my ribs to this day. What he found inside shocked everyone. My heart had been shoved up under my armpit, my diaphragm was torn, and all my organs were rearranged, as if someone had just shaken my insides like a snow globe. He later told me he'd never seen anyone live through injuries like mine. Not once. As Dr. Lowell worked frantically to bring me back, I began to drift again, further from the room, from the noise, from my body. The lights grew dimmer, the voices faded, and I felt myself lifting, floating above the operating room. But instead of being pulled into nothingness, I was suddenly somewhere else, a quiet room off the side of the hospital. I could see my mom and dad kneeling on the floor, praying, and beside them was Dr. Lowell, the same man who had promised to save me, down on one knee with his head bowed. That sight hit me harder than anything. These weren't just prayers. They were desperate, pleading from the heart cries to God. And I could feel those prayers, not just hear them, but feel them. Then I was back over the operating table, watching as Dr. Lowell massaged my heart with his hands. And just as I was about to slip away completely, something changed. I was pulled into what felt like a tunnel, a swirling tunnel of light and motion, almost like wind and water at the same time, but peaceful, not scary. There was something sacred about it, like I was being carried instead of dragged. On the other side of that tunnel, I was met by someone I hadn't seen yet, someone I now know was my guardian angel. I never got a name, but I called him the Professor, not because he looked like one, but because he carried this wisdom, this depth, and strangely, a sense of humor that made me feel at ease. What happened next is nearly impossible to describe, but I'll do my best. I was shown everything, my life, in reverse, in forward motion from every angle. Not just the things I had done, but how they had affected other people. Every word I spoke, every decision I made, the good and the bad, all of it played out in full color. But there was no judgment, just understanding. I was shown what happens to people who live their whole lives denying God, truly closing their hearts. It wasn't fire and brimstone, it was something worse. Separation, total loneliness. Then I was shown different places, places that I now believe were parts of heaven. Some were lush and green, others bright and endless, each one more peaceful than the last. And then I saw him again, Jesus. He stood in front of me, but this time he looked different, not in appearance, but in presence. like he had shifted from the role of a guide to something even more intimate. I wanted to apologize. I wanted to fall at his feet for all the years I didn't believe, all the times I said he wasn't real. And he stopped me, not with his hands, just with love. He told me I was forgiven before I even asked. And then he said something I will never forget. Now you know. So what will you do with it? I woke up in the hospital a few hours later. The pain was unbearable. I could hardly move, but I was alive. And every part of me, every cell, every breath knew why. Jesus, he gave me another chance. And I made a promise, one I intend to keep for the rest of my life, that I'd tell this story to anyone who would listen. Because this wasn't just about me. It was about love and mercy and the truth that death isn't the end. If you've made it to the end of my story, thank you. And if something in you feels that pull, that warmth, that whisper, don't ignore it. Jesus is real. Heaven is real. And your life matters more than you could ever know. If this testimony spoke to you, please like this video, share it with someone you love, and subscribe for more stories like mine. You never know whose life it might change.